The Florida Gators are facing the Auburn Tigers tomorrow in the Final Four. Here's how they win.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Friday. I am Brandon Olson. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. This episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. And if you need one now, just go grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store and stock up today and stay energized. And the Florida Gators face the Auburn Tigers tomorrow at 6:09 Eastern Time, PM, of course. And it's going to be a battle, right? There's no other way to describe it. This is Auburn, the number 1 overall seed, as much as they shouldn't have been. This is Auburn, the number 1 team in the country for most of the year, against Florida, a team that actually won the SEC, won the SEC tournament, and also a 1 seed, and beat Auburn earlier this year. And look, we can take that game, Florida versus Auburn, the first time, and you can kind of throw it out the window, right? It was 2 months ago. Florida won by 9 in Auburn, but who's counting? Florida did not have Elijah Martin in that game. Florida did not have Micah Hanlogton in that game either. 2 guys that play valuable minutes for this team right now. And when we talk about how the Florida Gators can win this game and what they need to do to win this game, it starts with winning down low, right? And winning down low in this sense is the equivalent of winning in the trenches in football, right? You know, you got a great O-line, great D-line. You can dominate the line of scrimmage, and even teams that are more finessey, 3-point shooting, you can still beat them that way. Like, you can get gritty, you can get dirty there. And Florida has been absolutely hammered in the paint since the start of the SEC tournament. This is the thing that we've talked about quite a bit on this show, both in terms of allowing points in the paint and allowing offensive rebounds, or more appropriately, not securing defensive rebounds, because it is, I know it's not as simple as that, but it kind of is as simple as that. Secure your defensive rebounds and the other team can't get offensive rebounds. And Florida's done a horrible job of that since the start of the SEC tournament. I've said this multiple times. It's been a thing I keep complaining about. You can watch the film, and guess what? That backs it up. You can look at the numbers, which I've said many times, and that backs it up as well. Florida's offensive rebounding allowed rate has gotten about 5% worse since the start of the SEC tournament. Not exactly an ideal situation to be in, right? So Florida's been getting hammered there. You look at the Texas Tech game, and there was a stretch where Texas Tech just went, hey, Toppin, Williams, go ahead, post up, get into the paint, and hammer them, and just bully them there. Norfolk State had, I think it was 48 points in the paint against Florida. UConn had success in the paint against Florida. Florida's been getting hammered down low. And I've said before that perhaps it's because of Alex Condon's ankle is bothering him a little bit more than he's letting on, especially when you talk about the back-to-back games that you've got to play. The SEC tournament is 3 days in a row. March Madness, you're playing 2 games, and you're playing like a game every other day for the weekend, and then you've got those days off during the week. And maybe that's aggravating him a little bit more. But Florida needs to have the energy that they had against Maryland on the glass, because Maryland, there were long stretches of time where commentators were kind of just like, Maryland hasn't gotten a rebound in minutes at this point. There's a long stretch of time there, and you need to have that kind of energy and that kind of tenacity against Auburn when you're attacking the glass here. Like, John Broome is going to try and get to work early and often. That's what Auburn does. They want to get him going, get him moving, and get him involved early and often. And the Florida Gators need to do a couple of really important things with that, right? One, you need to force difficult shots without fouling. You can't force a difficult shot because you foul them, And now he's shooting free throws anyway, right? Like you need to force difficult shots without fouling. And then you need to hustle to get these boards. Because when you watch Auburn, you're going to see John Broome, of course, is going to be around the rim going for his rebounds after his shot if he misses. But you're going to see Miles Kelly, Chaney Johnson, Dylan Cardwell, Chad Baker Mazzara, whoever else is also on that court with John Broome, except for maybe the smallest guard on the court at the time. They're all going to be going after the glass. So Florida's non-bigs need to be active here as well. Talking about the Maryland game, I loved the way that Will Richard seemingly attacked there. Maryland and Texas Tech, I feel like he's been putting more effort and more emphasis on defensive rebounding. So I would like to see Will Richard continue to do that. And then offensively, because again, I know that we've spent much of this time talking about what Florida allows or doesn't allow on the glass or down low, but offensively, Florida needs to do a couple things where I said this during the Texas Tech game, might have been the Maryland game, but during the last weekend of tournament games, I sent a message to the Subtext, the Insider program, and which, by the way, if you want to join, the links in the description below, or go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnGators. But I said in there, I was like, hey, look, like Walter Clayton Jr. is getting the superstar whistle. Like he's gotten a couple calls where he probably shouldn't have gotten the call, where I don't believe he got fouled, but he's getting the superstar whistle. And if you're going to get the superstar whistle, you got to take advantage of that. So for Florida, when I say win down low, I don't just mean with your bigs. I mean, Walter Clayton Jr. has to dribble, drive, penetrate, and get down low, get to the free throw line if possible. Like if you're getting the superstar whistle and you can get the superstar whistle against their superstar in John Broome, that's a double up, right? That's extra credit there. So if you can get low, get to the free throw line, or for Florida's bigs or anybody else to crash the boards and get second chance opportunities, like Auburn, one of the better defenses in the country. All four of the teams remaining in the Final Four are elite. Again, I can't stress how many times we've talked about this, where I know that people hate that there's no Cinderella, right? That there's no 12 seed that's still around. There's no anything like that. But what we are watching is the best of the best of all time playing against each other. We're not just talking about, oh, yeah, these are the best four teams this year, and that's it. No, we're talking about, according to Ken Palm, these are four of the top 10 teams of all time in college basketball. Like, yeah, you don't get the Cinderella, but you're getting as much quality as you've ever seen in college basketball. Okay. So they're going to be playing good offense. They're going to be playing good defense. I mean, we've talked about Houston, right? I don't know if their style of play will work against the elite of the elite, but against everybody else, it works. Their offense of just, hey, we're going to be really slow things down, going to get threes, going to crash the boards to get more looks, kill more time, shoot more threes. Like they're going to take that approach and it's going to work fine for them. But for Florida in this game, you need to be able to attack what Auburn is doing, right? And Auburn, they're going to play good defense. They're going to attack the boards. You may not want to attack the boards as much as Auburn does, but you need to if you're Florida. That's an important thing there, where you need to be able to go out there and attack. And for Florida, I think that John Broome being a target point, if you will, we'll talk about that in a second. But trying to get after him, make him work. We know he's not fully healthy, and as much as people don't want to admit it, if you know someone has something bothering them physically, you're going to try to exploit it, right? We'll talk about that a little bit in the next segment when we get back with this episode of Locked On Gators. This episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Fabric, and life moves fast, especially when you have a family. So one day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch, and you can be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. And if you like making money, not just saving it, Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2-player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, first inning runs. Prize Picks keeps every game exciting, and I'll tell you what, Aaron Judge, more than one home run, somehow hit because he hit 3 last week. He's just a psychopath. Ellie De La Cruz, O'Neal Cruz, both of them have been stealing bases left and right. So more than half a stolen base. Just saying. Download the app today. Use code Locked On College to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On College for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free, whether it's in the podcast and on YouTube. And we're talking about this Florida Gators Final Four game against the Auburn Tigers here and what Florida has to do to win. And I think one of the things Florida has to do is not necessarily a stat that we can talk about. It's not necessarily a metric we can bring up or prove. It's just something that you got to watch the tape, watch the film, and talk about. And I think it's keeping Auburn moving. And by that, I mean that, like, let's talk about yesterday. We had the bonus show with Locked On College Basketball, myself, and Zach Blackerby. And in it, we talked about Walter Clayton Jr., right? And Walter Clayton Jr. has emerged to become one of those players where you just can't stop him, right? He's just a guy where you got to watch him play, and you've got to say, all right, I don't know how we stop him. We can only hope to, 1, slow him down, or 2, hope that he's having an off night. And that's kind of it. That's the whole plan. That's the game plan to stopping Walter Clayton Jr. Hope and pray. All right. Auburn is going to throw everything they can at him. Again, we're talking about 4 teams in the Final Four that are absolutely elite. They all have deep rosters. They all have top talent. So that you are allowed to just say, hey, we've got multiple guys we feel comfortable with throwing in the mix here. Let's do it. And with Walter Clayton Jr., I would expect Auburn to do everything. Throw the kitchen sink at him if you can. Like, I think that I'm expecting, I'll say, Auburn to have whoever they line up versus Walter Clayton Jr. I would assume Denver Jones or Miles Kelly, maybe Chad Baker-Mazara, but like, I get Chad Baker-Mazara having the size advantage there, but I don't think he can keep up with Walt on a possession by possession basis. So I think it's most likely Denver Jones or Miles Kelly to, once Walter Clayton Jr. crosses half court, I expect them to press him, maybe even trap him, or you could even press him full court. Like, he could just be a guy where you say, hey, we're going to extend this all the way full court. And he's the only guy that we're full court pressing, but we're going to full court press him, maybe even full court trap him, just to get the ball out of his hands, right? He is the facilitator of this offense. He's got one of the highest usage rates in college basketball. He's going to be the guy that Florida is going to give the ball to him, let him cook, let him figure things out, try to get him looks, try to get him as many touches as possible. I think Auburn's plan is going to be, don't worry about him missing shots. Just don't let him get the ball. Easier said than done, of course. Florida's going to do a lot to get the ball in his hands. Like, I would look to see a lot of those dribble handoffs. I would like to see a lot of screens there, because Florida wants to get the ball in Walter Clayton Jr.'s hands, but also Auburn switches a ton defensively, like Florida. That's you look at these analytic oriented coaches, and a lot of them have defenses that are heavily switch reliant. And maybe that's partially because of coming from similar trees or whatever it may be, but they're going to switch a lot defensively. Florida and Auburn switch, I think, more than just about any other team in the country. And so you're going to see a lot of switches. And Florida, that could benefit you, right? Like, let's say you go, hey, Elijah Martin, walk it up court. We're going to run a bunch of action. Try to get the ball into Walt's hands with a favorable defender, right? That could be the plan. I think you will see some possessions where you get those mismatches. Like, you will almost definitely at one point see a possession where, after all the action, after all the window dressing, after all that, you're going to see Walter Clayton Jr. dribbling on the perimeter, And John Broome is probably going to be lined up against him at some point. I'm not saying it's going to be a consistent thing. I'm not saying that they're planning on doing that. I just think with how much they switch, I think you'll see that at some point again. And you'll also see the opposite where you'll see Alex Condon or Ruben Chinyelu with a Denver Jones or a Tahaad Pettiford on them. And you should say, all right, just throw it down low. And if someone helps, kick it out, which is why I prefer there to be Alex Condon because I do trust his passing significantly more. But you get it to Condon, he's dribbling down low. He's not a great finisher around the rim, right? But against a guard, he should be able to do it. Protect the ball, go up. And again, if someone helps, kick it out. Actually, maybe it should be Chinyelu that we would hope gets that because at least he can then kick out to Condon who could help. Where if it's Condon, maybe you have a big man help down from Chinyelu and then you just try to get that pass for two. And as we know, analytics 3 is more than 2. So we'll go with that. But I do think that Florida's plan is going to be maybe even more dribble handoff and screen reliant than usual because Auburn's going to switch a lot, and you can exploit some mismatches there. I will also say this. This is what I touched on briefly last segment of John Broome. We know he's not 100% healthy, right? We know that last week against Michigan State, he left the game holding his right arm. First off, he walked off the court to the bench holding his right shoulder. Then he went to block a shot, and when he came down, he walked off the court holding what looked like his right elbow. And I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, all right, if I'm Florida, if I'm Todd Golden, every time I get the opportunity to screen John Broome, and it makes sense. That's why I say when you get the opportunity, because obviously you could just say, hey, every possession, we're going to screen him. But I mean, when it makes sense, I'm going to set a screen on his right side, and I'm going to make him first initiate contact there, and second fight through with an arm that's not 100%, right? So that's how I would look at it, at least if I'm Florida. I know it's not nice to talk about, right? But when you're playing a game and you know someone has a limitation, you exploit that limitation. That's your job as a coach, as a team. That's what you're supposed to do. And so if I'm Florida, I'm making John Broome work through those screens. I'm making him fight through everything. I am trying to make him use his right hand as much as possible as a finisher. I'm going to try to make him do everything that I don't know if he's comfortable doing it. He could be perfectly fine right now, right? That could be a completely moot point. But the fact is, with the information we have available, is that he missed some practices, that he's been banged up, that he was banged up multiple times during the Michigan State game. You watch him and you see it. And so I'm going to say, okay, earn it. Simple, like if you beat us, you beat us, but we're going to make you earn it. That's got to be one of the focal points, right? It's like, hey, we know obviously no one wants to lose, but someone has to lose. But if we're going to be the team that loses, it's going to be because you had to fight and claw and scratch and win to do it. And so I think that if you're Florida, you have these switches or have these screens to force switches, have these dribble handoffs where you're going to get switches. Do everything you can to get proper mismatches, whatever you're looking for. It could be, hey, we want Walter Clayton Jr. against Chad Baker-Mazara. We don't think Chad Baker-Mazara can keep up with him. He's going to get the dribble drive, and either you help or he gets a layup or he kicks out, whatever it may be. Maybe he gets fouled. Who knows? But that would be my plan offensively, is keep him moving, keep him working, keep him running. We know that this is going to be a relatively up-tempo game. We know that this is going to be a game where both teams are probably going to go 8 men deep, but I mean, Auburn, they don't do it often. Like they have an 8-man rotation, but it's like, oh yeah, 4 minutes. So it's not really, not really that. Or at least they've been using that during the tournament. Of 4 minutes. That's our 8-man rotation. Which we will talk about the bench next, by the way. But for Florida, I think that's what you got to do. You got to figure out ways to keep Janai fighting through traffic. I mean, he's player of the year candidate for a reason, right? We're in a tournament where there's 3 very legitimate player of the year candidates in Janai, Walt, and Cooper Flagg, who's obviously not in this game. But as the actual candidates, I mean, like I think that even if Houston wins it, it's going to be one of those 3 that gets it at the end of it. But I think that Florida, like there's paths to it, right? There's paths to attacking. You also have your weaknesses. Every team will have their points of attack. And for Florida, you got to try your best to figure out how you can do it against Auburn, how you can make them work. And again, hey, if Janai wants to shoot 7 for 16 from 2 again, like I'm pretty sure that was his line against Florida the first time. Like if he wants to do that again, I'm cool with it. I'm fine with it. I wouldn't hate that. We are going to talk about one last thing that I think Florida needs to do when we get back with Locked On Gators. Daylight savings time has snuck up on us again. And if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5-hour energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun. But sometimes you need a little bit of a boost to power through, whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, whether you're squeezing in a round of golf after work. I've never golfed in my life, but you might. I know a lot of people do. I play basketball. How about that? Play a game of basketball after work, whatever, maybe. Or just trying to keep up with your busy day. 5-hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, peach mango. Tidal Twist is one that we tried here on the show. Grape is my favorite. You can build your own 12-pack, 24-pack delivered right to your door. If you need one now, grab a 5-hour energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store, and they are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And to wrap up today's show, we are still talking about how Florida can beat Auburn. We've talked about winning down low. Again, that means points in the paint and defensive rebounds. We've talked about keeping Auburn moving, fighting through screens, attacking mismatches when you have a guard against a big, or vice versa if you're Florida. Whatever it may be, we've talked about that. The last thing is winning the bench battle, okay? Both teams have a couple bench. Both teams have one guy that I would classify as a bench superstar, right? And then they've got their role player that's going to step in. Both teams are reliant on those bench players giving them the sufficient production that they need in order to be able to stick with the bench and let their starters rest a little bit. For Florida, they will look at their other guard in Denzel Aberdeen. I don't know if we should call him the third or fourth guard. I guess it depends what you classify Will Richard as, because I just straight up call him a wing or a small forward, because I feel like that's what he is, right? So I just usually call him a wing or a small forward, but whatever. Denzel Aberdeen, the bench guard, is going to come in. He'll probably get you a couple buckets, hopefully a couple defensive plays. Great. Micah Handlogden is going to come in, hopefully get some offensive rebounds, hopefully a couple putbacks. Like if Micah Handlogden's 2 for 2 or 2 for 3 with his 3 or 4 offensive rebounds, and some of them are going to be, actually, he's probably going to go like 2 for 5 because he has that thing where he just like tips it up a bunch because he's like, I don't know, 9'7" or something like that. He's just a giant out there. And then, of course, there's America's sixth man, the rightful sixth man of the year in Thomas Haugh. And Thomas Haugh comes in and does everything for Florida. I mean, his 3-point shooting against Texas Tech was incredible. I mean, a 33% shooter on the year from 3, and he went 4 for 6, including 2 huge threes late in the game. Like, Thomas Haugh is playing better basketball than pretty much anybody in the country right now. There's 5 guys playing better basketball than him right now, and that's kind of it. So Thomas Haugh is going to be, he's the bench superstar, right? Denzel Aberdeen could start on basically any team other than Florida, but he's the third guard here. I'll call him the third guard. Screw it. He's the third guard. Thomas Haugh is the bench superstar. Micah Handlogden comes in, gives the bigs a rest, gets some rebounds, putbacks, hopefully, call it a day. Auburn has maybe the second best sixth man, not just in the country, but especially as of late. They might have the second best sixth man in the country right now in Tahaad Pettiford, because Tahaad Pettiford has been an absolute animal this whole tournament. And the only time that he didn't have an incredible game was Michigan State, which, 2 things about that. One, I don't blame him, right? Like that was if you watched that game, it was a gritty game. It was physical. They were hanging and banging him. Michigan State had I forgot the dude's name, but he had 4 fouls and he was still just being aggressive as can be. And I was like, all right, these guys are going at it. They're playing rugby out there. Um, and so it was a physical, low scoring game for the most part. Um, and also, I don't like that. I don't like that his worst game of the tournament was his most recent game because I look at it and I say, okay, well, in the tournament, he's been pretty good, had 1 bad game. What are the odds that he's going to have 2 bad games in a row? And that's what I look at. I say, well, those odds probably aren't very high, meaning I wouldn't anticipate him having a rough game this time around. And so you've got Tahaad Pettiford, who's just been dynamite, right? Just absolute dynamite. And they will also have Chaney Johnson, who big hustle player for Auburn. Obviously not their 6th man of the year caliber player. That's Tahaad, and Tahaad deserves it. He's a very good basketball player. But Chaney's still going to come in, make some plays, and make Florida work, right? And when I meant win the bench battle, or when I said win the bench battle, I was not saying it's as cut and dry as, well, have more bench points, right? Like win the bench battle, have your bench outscore their bench. It's not what I mean for 2 reasons. One, Florida will have more of a legit 8-man rotation. Auburn will likely have more of a legit 7-man rotation. So Florida having more people means, okay, more bench point opportunities. We're not going to say get more bench points win the game. What I do mean is have a more impactful bench presence, right? I do mean that all those offensive rebounds Thomas Haugh has been getting lately, keep getting them. Denzel Aberdeen has been shooting fairly well from 3, not a ton of volume, but he's been hitting his shots from 3 in the tournament. Keep doing that. Like keeping that up is going to be huge because Denzel Aberdeen, again, a guy who on the year 36% from 3. I don't think people give him credit for that as much. But against Texas Tech, he went 1 for 2 from 3. Against Maryland, he went 2 for 4. He didn't attempt one against UConn. Went 1 for 1 versus Norfolk State. Went 1 for 1 against Tennessee in the SEC tournament. Went 1 for 3 against Alabama. Like he's been pretty consistent. He had his, that stretch earlier in the year where he was starting and just going off 20-point games. He's shown that he can get buckets, right? He's shown that he can provide that juice. Have those few key clutch plays. Have Thomas Haugh doing his thing. Have Micah Handlockton getting you 4 to 8 second chance points. Just keep going with that. And that's what I mean. Having a bigger bench impact. I think that will be a huge deciding factor in who wins this game. We know that both of these starting 5s are elite. We know both of these teams are elite. Have a better bench performance than Auburn, and Florida should win this game. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day, every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. We will be going live tomorrow, immediately following this game. Win or lose, we will be live. Hopefully it's a win, and hopefully we will get to cover another basketball game on Monday. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olson. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I will see you all next time.